So friends, are you sick and tired of Donald Trump's endless lies that play 24/7 on unrelenting media loops? Example, did you hear the audio recording of Donald Trump bloviating at yesterday's sentencing hearing in his criminal case in New York? I'll bet you did. Now, did you hear audio recordings of the prosecutor's statement to the court yesterday about the crimes Donald Trump was convicted of and the damage done by those crimes? Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, there's no doubt about it. Mainstream media knows that Donald Trump helps them sell soap powder. Donald Trump keeps eyeballs on TVs and on computer screens and on phones. Trump's lies proliferate, they saturate, and they poison. You know, friends, I spend every day trying to explain as best I can how the rule of law is supposed to work. But what fills the airwaves every day is the garbage that Donald Trump spews, right? Turn on the TV and it's, hey, let's have a look at the latest unhinged social media post by Donald Trump. Let's watch clips of his latest outrageous press conference. You know, this obsession with airing the outrageous, with showing us every stupid-ass thing Donald Trump says, was driven home to me again in recent days when I kept hearing Donald Trump bloviating in yesterday's sentencing hearing in his criminal case in New York. Every time I turn the channel, I'm hearing more of Donald Trump's audio recordings about hoaxes and witch hunts and conflicted judges and deranged prosecutors, all of which is absolute and utter bullshit. But that's what gets blasted at us 24/7. And yet, I was hard-pressed to hear much of the audio recording of the prosecutor's argument to Judge Merchan, to the court, about the crimes Donald Trump committed and the consequences of those crimes. So friends, with your kind indulgence, I'm going to try to make just a tiny little dent in that reporting disparity. And I'm going to read the prosecutor's statement to Judge Merchan before Judge Merchan imposed sentence on Donald Trump. Because unlike Trump's statement to the court yesterday, the prosecutor's statement presented by Joshua Steinglass was factual, it was accurate, and it was important. Here is the statement that Alvin Bragg's prosecutor, Joshua Steinglass, presented to Judge Merchan. The defendant in this case, as you know, stands convicted of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree, all Class E felonies. Each carries a range of authorized sentencing options from as much as 1 1/3 to 4 years in state prison to a variety of non-incarceratory sentences. In this court's January 3rd decision on the defendant's Clayton motion, Your Honor indicated an inclination to impose an unconditional discharge. Under all the circumstances of this case, its unique posture, and defendant Trump's status as president-elect, the people, meaning the prosecutors, recommend a sentence of an unconditional discharge. In finding the defendant guilty in this case, the jury necessarily found unanimously that defendant Trump falsified 34 separate entries in his business records with the intent to defraud, which included an intent to commit or conceal a conspiracy to promote his own election by unlawful means. Having presided over the trial, Your Honor is very familiar with the conduct, its seriousness, and the overwhelming evidence to support the jury's verdict. I'm certainly not going to rehash that now. In last week's decision, on January 3rd, this court referred to the gravamen of the defendant's conduct, his criminal conduct in this case, as constituting premeditated and continuous deception. The verdict was delivered by a jury that was carefully chosen using an extensive questionnaire based on suggestions from both parties and after thorough questioning of the prospective jurors by both sides. The verdict in this case was unanimous and decisive, and it must be respected. As this court has observed, quote, the sanctity of a jury verdict and the deference that must be accorded to it is a bedrock principle in our nation's jurisprudence. The defendant's conduct before, during, and after this trial also merits consideration. Instead of preserving, protecting, and defending our constitutionally established system of criminal justice, Defendant Trump, the once and future President of the United States, has engaged in a coordinated campaign to undermine its legitimacy. Far from expressing any kind of remorse for his criminal conduct, the defendant has purposefully bred disdain for our judicial institutions and the rule of law. And he's done this to serve his own ends and to encourage others to reject the jury verdict that he finds so distasteful. He has characterized these proceedings as corrupt, rigged, a witch hunt, or a sham, too many times to tabulate. The defendant's rhetoric has only ratcheted up since this court's ruling on his motions to dismiss. He has been unrelenting in his unsubstantiated attacks upon this court and its family, individual prosecutors and their families, the witnesses, the grand jury, the trial jury, and the justice system as a whole. The defendant has not only been held in contempt by other jurists in other matters, but this court alone found defendant Trump in contempt for 10 distinct violations of the order restricting extrajudicial speech. In his legal filings, defendant Trump has used dangerous rhetoric and leveling accusations of intentionally unlawful and unconstitutional conduct on the part of this court and the prosecution. As this court has noted, the defendant's conduct, quote, constitutes a direct attack on the rule of law itself, close quote. Moreover, defendant Trump has publicly threatened to retaliate against the prosecutors who have sought to hold him accountable in this and other matters, and the courts who have endeavored to fairly and faithfully adjudicate these matters. Such threats are designed to have a chilling effect, to intimidate those who have the responsibility to enforce our laws in hopes that they will ignore the defendant's transgressions because they fear that he's simply too powerful to be subjected to the same rule of law as the rest of us. In his 2024 end-of-year report, United States Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts warned of the dangers of such conduct. Quote, public officials, too, regrettably, have engaged in recent attempts to intimidate judges. For example, suggesting political bias and the judge's adverse rulings without credible basis for such allegations. Chief Justice Roberts continued, quote, attempts to intimidate judges for their rulings are inappropriate and should be vigorously opposed. Public officials certainly have a right to criticize the work of the judiciary, but they should be mindful that intemperance in their statements when it comes to judges may prompt dangerous reactions by others. Chief Justice Roberts also spoke of the dangers of disinformation, which are magnified by social media which provides a ready channel to instantly spread rumor and false information. Put simply, this defendant, Donald Trump, has caused enduring damage to public perception of the criminal justice system and has placed officers of the court in harm's way. In the probation report, which we just received this morning, the author, having interviewed the defendant, noted that the defendant sees himself as above the law and won't accept responsibility for his actions. And that's certainly consistent with everything else that we've seen. Now, in a typical case, both the offense conduct and these other exacerbating factors would impact the appropriate sentence. But in this case, we must be respectful of the office of the presidency and mindful of the fact that the defendant will be inaugurated as president in 10 days. Any undischarged portion of the sentence has the potential to interfere with the defendant's performance of the duties of his office. As a practical matter, the most sensible sentence prior to his inauguration is an unconditional discharge. The court has expressed an inclination to do exactly that because, in the court's words, the most viable solution to ensure finality and allow defendant to pursue his appellate options is to proceed to sentence. As you know, in New York, a conditional discharge is authorized by the penal law if the court, having regard to the nature and circumstances of the offense and to the history, character, and condition of the defendant, is of the opinion that neither the public interest nor the ends of justice would be served by a sentence of imprisonment and that probation supervision is not appropriate. An unconditional discharge is authorized if a conditional discharge is authorized and if the court is of the opinion that no proper purpose would be served by imposing any condition upon the defendant's release. Because these crimes are felonies, the court must set forth in the record the reasons for its action. The American public has the right to a presidency unencumbered by pending court proceedings or ongoing sentence-related obligations, but imposing this sentence ensures that finality. Sentencing the defendant permits this court to enter judgment to cement the defendant's status as a convicted felon while he pursues whatever appeals he intends to pursue, and it gives full effect and respect to the jury's verdict while preserving the defendant's ability to govern. The people therefore recommend that this court impose a sentence of an unconditional discharge. Thank you. So friends, first of all, thank you for bearing with me and letting me read that. I think it's fair to say that none of the prosecutor's statements seem to be played by mainstream media on an endless loop, the way we are forever hearing about hoaxes and witch hunts and conflicted judges and deranged prosecutors. Imagine that if instead of those lies, the airwaves were saturated with the truth. Things like how Donald Trump's course of criminal conduct constitutes premeditated and continuous deception. Like how Trump has engaged in a coordinated campaign to undermine the legitimacy of the criminal justice system, and how he purposefully breeds disdain for our judicial institutions and the rule of law. How he threatens to retaliate against prosecutors who have sought to hold him accountable, along with their families and the witnesses and the grand jury and the trial jury. And how Trump's threats are designed to have a chilling effect, to intimidate those who have the responsibility to enforce our laws. How about mainstream media start saturating the airwaves with those truths, those unassailable truths, those dangerous truths? because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.